Rhonda's worn leather wallet snapped open at the optician's counter. $80 stared back at her. Her daughter Natalie's fingers frantically counted thin bills, coming up desperately short. 9-year-old Kirby stood at the mirror in round blue frames, grinning like he had just discovered the world actually had sharp edges. Then he heard the devastating price. He quietly took off the glasses and set them down on the glass display. "It's okay, Grandma. I can see fine," he lied. 36 years running quality control at a massive poultry plant, and this was Rhonda's brutal reward. Absolute financial ruin. Hidden poverty is a quiet, rotting disease, but the public humiliation of failing your own flesh and blood burns like acid. She was helplessly robbing Peter to pay Paul just to keep the lights on. Would you just stand there and let your grandson's world go permanently out of focus? Natalie called that Wednesday evening. Her voice trembled with the heavy, suffocating weight of a mother in a panic. Kirby's vision was a -3 in both eyes. He couldn't even read the chalkboard at school, hopelessly copying off a friend who only got C's. The thick lenses cost $450 after insurance, and Natalie only had $200. "Mum, can you and Dad help with the rest?" she pleaded. $250. Rhonda stood paralysed on the back porch, breathing in the thick September smoke from Pete's smouldering brush pile. She ran the agonising math. She calculated every single penny the exact same way she used to meticulously measure industrial feed ratios. Her monthly Social Security check brought in $12.90. Pete's brought $10.80. Combined, exactly $23.70. Electric and propane devoured $3.80. Their vital medications for Pete's bad back, his blood pressure, and her fading thyroid snatched another $3.10. Basic grain and oyster shells for the backyard birds took $2.80. Generic groceries stripped away $6.20. The phone bill was $75. Property tax, escrow and insurance mercilessly drained $3.50. Total remainder? A pathetic $3.55. Living paycheck to paycheck was a nightmare, but this was a death sentence. $2.50 subtracted from a razor-thin reality. She gripped the plastic receiver. "Of course, Nat," she whispered. It was a desperate, fragile lie wrapped around an absolute impossibility. Friends, tell us in the comments right now, where are you from and does your Social Security actually last you to the end of the month? Has anyone ever judged you for struggling to pay the bills while they lived comfortably? Hit that like button so this story reaches the hard-working people fighting that exact same silent battle. Rhonda thought her life was permanently trapped in the red. But a simple wooden coop sitting in her backyard held the secret to a certified empire she hadn't even built yet. She just needed to step into the straw. Pete sat on the porch step, stick between his knees, watching the brush pile smoulder. 74, bad back, bad knees, hands that could still build, but only if he stood up slowly and sat down sooner. Natalie called. "Kirby needs glasses, $4.50. Our share, $2.50. "From what?" He didn't turn. "From the rest. That leaves $100 for a month." "I know, Pete." "That's not living, Rhonda. That's rationing." Didn't answer because Pete was right, and rationing was more honest than budgeting. You budget when you choose, you ration when the choice is already made. Morning. 5 a.m, no alarm. The body remembered, the way it had remembered for 36 years at the plant. Feet on the floor, kettle on the stove, jacket, rubber boots. The coop stood behind the house, wood and wire, built by Pete 8 years ago when his back still let him build rather than patch. 12 by 10 feet, roosts from birch poles, nesting boxes from old crates lined with straw, and one window covered in plastic sheeting through which the morning light fell at an angle, yellow and thick. Rhonda opened the door and the smell hit. Warm, animal. The smell that city people call a stink and country people call a morning. Straw, feather, grain, droppings, and something alive, the scent of a place where 30 birds wake up every day. 15 Rhode Island Reds sat on the roosts, watching Rhonda with the expression chickens wear. Simultaneously regal and witless, the face of a professor who's forgotten what he meant to say. Rhonda reached into the first nest, straw, warm, scratchy. Her fingers found the egg, smooth, heavy, warm from the hen. Lifted it to the light, deep orange, the colour that comes only from birds eating grass, bugs and sunlight, rather than pellets from a sack marked layer crumble. Set it in the pail. Second nest, third, fourth, and each egg warm and the pail growing heavier. Quail in the corner, 20 Japanese quail in a wire enclosure, small, nervous, chattering with the alarm clock urgency of birds that treat every morning as an emergency. Their eggs, speckled, walnut-sized, 5 in a palm. Rhonda collected them with 2 fingers because the shell is thin. Squeeze too hard and the yolk, orange, dense, bright as paint, runs onto the straw. Collected, 9 chicken, 14 quail. Wrote in the log, a composition book, graph-ruled, on the shelf by the coop door, its cover soft from 3 years of handling. September 17th. Chicken, 9. Speckle, 1. Blackie, 1. Red, 0. Others, 7. Quail, 14. Average egg weight, 63 grams. Red, check. 3rd day no egg. Small handwriting, abbreviated, the habit of a technician who logged flocks of 10,000 and brought the habit home to 15, because precision doesn't scale down. It stays or it leaves. And Rhonda's stayed. Saturday, she rode to the Zanesville Farmers Market. 30 minutes, $12 gas, carrying 4 dozen chicken and 2 dozen quail packed in newspaper, every pothole a flinch. Set up between goat cheese and honey. Cardboard sign. Farm eggs. Chicken $6 dozen, quail $8 dozen. Chicken moved slowly. 4 dozen by noon, $24. Buyers haggled, and each haggle cost $1 she couldn't afford to lose. Quail sat dead. 2 hours, no sale. A woman leaned down. Quail eggs? What do you do with those? Rhonda could have lectured. Amino acids, lysozyme, iron at twice the chicken level. But between goat cheese and honey, a lecture sounds like a plant presentation. She said, healthy, good for kids. The woman shrugged. 1 dozen sold by afternoon. $8, probably pity. Total, 32. Minus gas, 20 net. Half a day standing in the cold. Pete. Gas eats it. 2 more trips and you're in the red. She was quiet, because he was right. The next Saturday, Natalie brought Kirby, as every weekend. And with him, his friend Dennis, 9, city kid, clean sneakers, who'd never touched a live bird. Dennis's mother, Shelley, 35, bank teller, short hair, quick eyes, drove them out and stood at the gate. Kirby dragged Dennis to the coop with the excitement of a child showing his best thing. Dennis stepped inside, saw 15 hens on roosts, and froze. Whoa, they're real. Can I touch one? You can collect, Rhonda said, following them in. Slow. Hand into the straw. Don't grab. Dennis reached in, carefully, the way you lower a hand into water when you don't know the temperature, and found the egg. Warm, smooth, heavy. Pulled it out, held it to his eyes. A piece of straw stuck to the shell, a tiny feather. The face of a boy who just understood, for the first time, where food comes from. Not a carton, not a shelf, but a nest, a bird, straw, warmth. Mrs. Harlan, can I keep it? Keep it, just don't drop. Shelley came in after 5 minutes, drawn by laughter and, look, another one. Saw, 2 boys with eggs. Rhonda, 15 hens watching with professorial indifference. Rhonda, these are really from your chickens, not store-bought. From the coop. Rhode Island Reds. Grain, pasture, no commercial feed. Rhonda boiled 3. 10 minutes, cut in half. Yolk, deep orange, almost red, dense, buttery. White, firm, not watery. Shelley tasted and her face changed. Not surprise, but recognition. The look of someone tasting something they'd forgotten existed. This is completely different. Completely. Like when I was little at my grandmother's. She paused. Can I buy some? And can we come every Saturday? Every Saturday. Customers driving to the property. Gas, 0. Potholes, 0. Time, 2 hours instead of 8. And quail eggs. Shelley didn't ask, what are those for? She asked, how many do you have? Rhonda packed 3 dozen chicken, 1 dozen quail, a bunch of dill from the garden. Shelley reached for her wallet. Rhonda shook her head. Gift. Thank Dennis. He collected the first one. Shelley drove off with eggs, herbs, boys, and the expression of someone who's found something valuable and is afraid to lose it. That evening, Natalie called. Mum, Shelley's raving. Says it tastes like childhood. Wants every Saturday. And her friend Opal wants in. 2 families became 3. 3 became 5 by the 3rd week. Opal's mother-in-law, Mrs. Antonelli, 73, dry, straight-backed, arrived with a canvas tote so old it predated the store that sold it, and asked, the quail eggs, they're good for anemia? My doctor mentioned it. Rhonda explained. Lysozyme, amino acid profile, iron at 2.5 milligrams per 100 grams, twice the chicken level, 3 to 4 a day for anemia, soft-boiled or raw. Mrs. Antonelli nodded and ordered 3 dozen per month. The first quail eggs sold without a shrug or a, what for? Saturday mornings took shape. Cars arrived by 10, 1, 2, 3, lining up on the gravel drive. Pete stood at the gate with his stick and the expression of a man receiving a tax audit. Rhonda, this is a yard, not a shopping centre. Pete, $4.50 for glasses. Do you have it? Pete went silent. The silence that means, you're right, but admitting it is losing, and walked to the shed, and the stick tapped the path with the rhythm of a metronome, counting the seconds until he adjusted. The children made the difference. Dennis brought Opal's daughter Lily, 6, pink boots, terrified of chickens until she held an egg and the terror became adoration. Kirby gave tours. This is Speckle, this is Blackie, and the quail are in the corner. Be quiet, they're nervous. With the authority of a boy who'd done this twice, which, at 9, is a career. Parents sat at the table Pete had carried out, silently, with the face of a martyr. And Rhonda served thyme tea, brewed from the patch by the fence. Cost, 0. Smell, the kind that makes people close their eyes and say, I feel like I'm at my grandmother's. Which is what Shelley said, and then Opal, and then Mrs. Antonelli, who added, except my grandmother would have charged. Rhonda laughed. The laugh surprised her. It came from a place that had been quiet since the plant closed, the place where being useful and being valued overlap. And that overlap is the closest thing to happiness a 71-year-old poultry technician knows. Pricing. She'd given the first batch free, but free is a gift, and gifts can't pay for glasses. Tuesday evening, phone in hand, she rehearsed. $6 a dozen for chicken, 8 for quail, herbs included. Said it aloud 3 times, stumbling on 8 because charging for quail eggs felt like charging for air, and air is what people breathe, and breathing should be free. But feed was $2.80 a month, and oyster shell cost money, and time was 5 a.m. every day without weekends. And time is money, even when the government says yours is worth $12.90, she told Shelley on Saturday. Shelley didn't blink. 6 for chicken? That's cheaper than the organic place in town, and your yolks are twice as orange. Opal paid without comment. Mrs. Antonelli counted exact change from a coin purse and said, "Fair price," which, from Mrs. Antonelli, was a standing ovation. First full Saturday, 5 families. 6 dozen chicken at 6, 36. 3 dozen quail at 8, 24. Herbs, dill, parsley, green onion. Shelley asked, "Can I buy these separately?" And Rhonda said $2 a bunch and sold 5 bunches. Total, $70. No gas, no potholes, 2 hours. Pete carried the egg crates to the cars, without being asked, without comment. And Rhonda saw him answer a question from Opal's husband. "How do you keep the coop so clean?" With a sentence that was almost friendly, which for Pete was unprecedented. Second optician trip. Kirby in the round blue frames, grinning. Natalie, 200. Rhonda, 80 plus the first 2 Saturdays. Total, 330. Still short by 120. Kirby took off the glasses, set them on the counter. "It's okay, Grandma." 2 words. No complaint, no tantrum. The silence of a child who's learned not to ask. And that silence hurt Rhonda more than any number in the log. She drove home and sat in the coop with the door closed, among the birds, in straw and feathers, and thought, 3 more Saturdays. If 5 families hold. If nobody quits. If the quail keep laying. Then Nick, neighbour, 65, former construction foreman, red face, loud voice. The kind of man who talks across a field because that's where his voice learned its volume. Kept 20 leghorns, sold eggs at a roadside table. Farm eggs, $4 dozen. Pale yolks, commercial feed. He'd seen the cars. Leaned on the fence Wednesday afternoon. "Rhonda, you selling eggs off the property?" "I am, Nick." "Got a poultry health certificate?" 3 words that froze her. The way salmonella freezes anyone who's spent 36 years in a poultry plant. 1 positive test and the whole flock is condemned. She knew the system from the inside. A health certificate meant blood draws, lab tests, salmonella, avian influenza, Newcastle disease. Without it, direct sales were a violation. "Fine. Up to $500. "No," she said. "Well, there you go. Without a certificate, can't sell. I keep birds too, but I don't sell without papers." Nick walked back to his yard with the satisfaction of a man who'd found someone else's mistake. And Rhonda stood at the fence thinking, $500 is Kirby's glasses, plus a month of feed. And the number made her hands shake. But she also thought, 1 call to the county vet, that's all. 1 call. That evening she opened the log to the last page and wrote, "County vet. Tests, salmonella, AI, Newcastle. Call tomorrow." Underlined in red, a habit from the plant, where red meant urgent and tomorrow meant tomorrow. 5 families would come Saturday. Rhonda had to meet them with a certificate. Or say not yet. And not yet meant they'd go to the grocery store, where eggs were always available and no one asked for paperwork. And competing with a grocery store was competing with a river. It flows always. You flow only when they let you. She called at 8 a.m. The woman who answered had the voice of someone who'd been answering phones since Monday and resented each ring. "County Veterinary Office." "I need a poultry health certificate. 15 chickens, 20 quail. Home flock, direct sales." "Need a flock inspection and blood draws. Salmonella pylori, avian influenza, Newcastle. Vet comes to you, draws blood, sends to the state lab. Results in 5 business days. $70 total." "Can it be faster?" 5 days is fast, usually 10. $70. Rhonda hung up and calculated. 70 from 355 remaining, 285. Minus 250 for the glasses, 35. $35 for 2 people until the next check. Pete would say, "You've lost your mind," and the arithmetic agreed. But without the certificate, there'd be no eggs, no families, no glasses. And $35 now was an investment in $300 a month later. Rhonda knew this the way she knew feed pH should be 6 to 7, precisely, from decades, without doubt. Pete said exactly what she expected. She didn't answer. Went to the kitchen, made tea, drank it standing by the window looking at the coop. 30 birds in there, each one laying, each egg worth 60 cents of revenue and $3 of trust. And trust without paperwork was a sandcastle. The vet came Thursday. Dr. Elena, mid-40s, blue county jacket, case with vials, syringes, nitrile gloves. She entered the coop the way a surgeon enters an operating room. Quietly, focused, professionally interested in everything that moved and laid. "Clean in here," she said, looking around. "Fresh bedding, ventilation, proper stocking density." "How long have you kept birds?" 7 years at home. Before that, 36 at the plant. Quality control. "Which plant?" "Valley Poultry, up in Mount Vernon." "You're a poultry tech?" One eyebrow up, recognition. "That explains the setup. This looks like a lab." Like a lab. And Rhonda felt something she hadn't felt since retiring. One professional recognizing another. Brief, wordless almost, expressed in 2 sentences, and the glance with which Dr. Elena scanned the roosts, nests, feeder, waterer, and saw a system, not a mess. Dr. Elena drew blood from each chicken's wing vein, quick, precise. The hens objected. Speckle tried to peck and missed. Blackie turned away with an offended air. Quail were harder. Small, nervous, darting. Dr. Elena held each one between 2 fingers the way you hold a moth. Firm enough to keep, gentle enough not to crush, because a quail is fragile and pressure breaks it. Results in 5 business days. If clean, I issue the certificate. If not, we deal with it. If not hung in the coop air, between the roosts, between the smell of straw, between Speckle ruffled from the needle and Red who'd finally laid after 4 days of nothing. If not meant quarantine, no sales, get your papers in order first. And Rhonda knew from the plant, 1 positive and the whole batch is condemned. And the word salmonella in a report means the end. 5 days of waiting. The birds laid, indifferent to bureaucracy. Pete drank tea in the living room and didn't mention the market. Nick passed on the road Wednesday, slowed his truck, looked at the coop, drove on. Rhonda stood in the doorway and thought, he's waiting for the results too, in his own way. Thursday. Email from the county office. Test results attached. Rhonda opened the PDF on her phone. Small screen, small print, squinting, and read, Salmonella pyllorum, negative, all samples. Avian influenza, negative. Newcastle disease, negative. Flock status, clean. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at the numbers. Negative, negative, negative. And felt the relief of a scientist whose hypothesis held. She'd known the flock was clean, the way she'd known every batch at the plant would pass, because the process was right, and the process doesn't lie. But knowing and proving are different comforts, and the proof on the screen was the one that mattered. The one she could tape to the coop wall and point to when anyone asked. Friday. Certificate issued. PDF, printed at the library for 20 cents. State of Ohio, Department of Agriculture, Poultry Health Certificate. Flock owner, Rhonda Harlan. Status, clean. NPIP participant, #OH-3847. She taped it to the inside of the coop door, next to the log, next to the feed chart. And now the coop wall held 3 documents, and 3 documents with a difference between a woman selling eggs from her yard and a certified poultry operation. And the difference cost $70 and 5 days, and was worth everything after. Saturday, 5 families came. Rhonda mentioned the certificate, casually while pouring tea. "We're NPIP certified now. Tested clean. Salmonella, influenza, Newcastle. All negative." Shelley nodded. Mrs. Antonelli said, "Good." The good of a woman who expected nothing less, but approved of confirmation. Opal's husband studied the certificate on the coop wall and said, "My cousin raises birds in Pataskala. She'd want your eggs. Can I give her your number?" Cousin. Then the cousin's co-worker. Then the co-worker's neighbour. The quiet chain. Not advertising, not Shelley's enthusiasm, just one person telling another, "There's a woman with a coop and a certificate, and the yolks are orange, and the kids collect eggs, and the tea has time." And by the 3rd week, 8 families on Saturday, and Rhonda counted the cars from the porch and thought, Pete was right. This isn't a yard anymore. But he was wrong about what it had become. Nick walked past the fence that Saturday, saw 8 cars, heard children laughing in the coop, smelled time. Stopped, looked at the certificate through the open coop door, and said nothing. Walked on. His silence was new. Usually he had opinions. And Rhonda understood. The certificate had closed the one door he could open against her, and with it closed, his leghorns and their pale yolks were competing with her reds and their orange ones. And the competition was not in price, but in trust. And trust has no roadside table. By November, 11 families. Every Saturday, 10 to noon, the gravel drive lined with cars. Rhonda had stopped counting them with anxiety and started counting with a different feeling. Not pride exactly, but the satisfaction a technician feels when a system runs. Birds lay, eggs collect, families come, money moves. Each step linked to the next, the way feed links to calcium, links to shell, links to yolk. Revenue settled. 11 families averaging $10 to $12 per visit. Chicken, quail, herbs, sometimes a jar of Rhonda's pickled beets. $2 because why not? And beets grew free. Weekly gross, 100 to 130. Monthly, 450 to 520. Minus feed, 280. Replacement bedding, oyster shell, the occasional bag of grit. Net about 180 to 240. Modest. Not a fortune, not a transformation. But $180 a month on top of $23.70 combined meant the difference between rationing and breathing. And breathing is not a luxury, it's the minimum. And Rhonda had been below the minimum for 3 years. She bought the glasses. 3rd trip to the optician. Natalie's $200, Rhonda's $250, accumulated over 5 Saturdays. $450 on the counter, exact. The clerk, the same one, rang it up without recognition, and Rhonda thought, she doesn't remember the 2 times we left. Good. The story that matters isn't the leaving, but the return. Kirby put on the round blue frames, stood at the mirror, turned his head left, right, grinned. Walked out onto the sidewalk and stopped. Looked up at the street signs, at the awnings, at the leaves on the maple across the road. Grandma, is the world always this detailed? Rhonda held his hand and didn't answer, because the answer was yes. And the fact that he'd spent a year in a blur, copying off Dennis, squinting at boards, saying, I can see fine, was a year she couldn't give back, and holding his hand was all she could do with the grief of it. At school the following week, Natalie texted. Kirby got a B on his math test. First B since January. Teacher says he actually reads the board now. Mum, the glasses are working. Rhonda read the text at the kitchen table next to the log and wrote nothing in the log because it wasn't an egg entry. But she thought, 63 grams per egg, $6 per dozen, 5 Saturdays for $4.50 for a B on a math test. The chain was long and strange and started in a nest and ended at a desk, and every link was warm. Pete fixed the roof, hired a young man from down the road, $180, and the roof stopped leaking for the first time in 5 years. The water stain above the kitchen table dried, and Rhonda, passing it every morning, felt a joy out of proportion to a dry ceiling. But proportion depends on how long you've been wet, and 5 years of buckets makes dryness feel extravagant. Pete noticed the families in his own way, not in words. Pete didn't do words about feelings, but in lumber. He built a bench by the coop, 2 planks on cinder blocks, sanded smooth, for parents who waited while children collected. Then a shelf by the gate for the egg crates, so Rhonda didn't have to carry them across the yard. Then, one Saturday, without being asked, he stood at the gate and directed traffic. Pull in left, park by the shed, coop straight ahead. Rhonda watched from the porch and said nothing, because if she said anything, he'd stop. And every word he said to a stranger was a small surrender of the privacy he'd guarded for 74 years, and surrenders shouldn't be interrupted. Shelley, on the last Saturday of November, stood by her car with the bag of eggs and the bundle of parsley and said, Rhonda, you know what I tell people? I tell them, go to Rhonda's, not for the eggs, for the morning. The tea, the birds, the kids in the coop, the quiet. It's not shopping, it's visiting. And visiting was the word Rhonda hadn't known she needed, because she hadn't built a business. She'd built a Saturday. And a Saturday where 11 families drove to a yard and drank thyme tea and watched their children hold warm eggs was not a transaction, but a place. And a place is worth more than any price on a cardboard sign. Mrs. Antonelli, who'd been eating 3 quail eggs a day for 2 months, had her blood work done in October. Iron levels? Up. My doctor asked what changed, she told Rhonda. I said quail eggs. He didn't believe me. I told him to come see your chickens, and he said he doesn't make house calls. I said, neither do your eggs. Rhonda laughed, the deep kind from the belly, the kind that requires an audience of one and a joke that only works between 2 women over 70 who've earned the right to be funny. Morning. Coop. 5 a.m. Rhonda opened the door. Straw, feathers, warmth, the soft clucking of birds settling after the night, the quail chattering in the corner. She reached into the first nest. Fingers found the egg. Warm, smooth, 63 grams. She knew the weight by touch, the way musicians know pitch and bakers know dough. Lifted it to the light. Orange, deep, with a piece of straw on the shell. The log on the shelf, open, ready. The certificate on the wall. And through the window, the yard, the bench Pete built, the gate, the road where in 5 hours the first car would turn in, and a child would run across the gravel, and Kirby, in round blue frames, would say, "Come on, I'll show you the quail." And the morning would begin. Rhonda set the egg in the pail, gently, the way she'd set 60,000 eggs in 36 years of mornings at the plant and 7 years of mornings here. And every morning the same gesture. Hand into straw, fingers around shell, lift, hold, set down. The same hands, the same warmth. Different math. The math that now included glasses and a dry roof, and Pete's bench, and 11 families, and a certificate on the wall, and a grandson who could read the board. All of it starting here, in the straw, at 5 a.m., with an egg that weighed 63 grams and held, in its shell, everything. To wrap up this story, let's look at what Rhonda did to reach her goals and cover her needs. What did Rhonda do? She kept chickens and quail on her property and couldn't make money at the farmer's market. Gas ate the profit and nobody wanted quail eggs. Within 3 months, 11 families were driving to her yard every Saturday, and she was earning enough to cover her grandson's glasses, fix the roof, and stop rationing. 3 lessons. First, flip the direction. Instead of hauling eggs to buyers over potholes, Rhonda let buyers come to her. Gas cost? 0. Time? 2 hours instead of 8. Sometimes the solution isn't to move faster, but to stay still and let others move toward you. Second, sell trust, not just product. The flock log, the certificate on the coop wall, the orange yolk, the thyme tea, the children collecting eggs, all of it together was trust. And trust is what makes a customer drive 30 minutes past a grocery store that's 5 minutes away. Documentation turns a yard into a farm. Third, when someone demands your papers, get them. Nick's question could have ended everything. Instead, $70 and 5 days produced a certificate that shut down the only objection and opened the door to 6 more families. A document is a wall, and walls keep you standing when the wind blows. You grow something, raise something, make something, and the buyers might already exist. They just don't know you're there. Write in the comments, what's in your yard? Hit that like button so this story reaches the people who need it right now. And subscribe. Every week we share stories of people who stopped hauling and started hosting.